Après, tout ce qui est entré va sortir. Il faut mettre d'autres choses dessus.
Juste pour une question, est-ce que c'est les mêmes étudiants et la même matière?
Oui.
Est-ce que vous pensez que l'évaluation via dossier il garantit l'équitabilité des chances?
Des chances, oui. Mais le problème, c'est dans la passation. Parce que si je ne suis pas habitué de passer une évaluation en ligne, ce n'est pas la même chose en présentiel. Donc, difficulté, contact avec la difficulté de passer l'évaluation sur la plateforme. Donc, voilà la différence que je vois.
Et pour le post-test en ligne, est-ce qu'il a fait au sein de l'équipe de l'établissement ou à distance?
Non, au sein de l'établissement.
Oui. Ok, merci.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? J'ai l'impression qu'on est en train d'ignorer le public en ligne. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Dans le chat?
Oui.
Docimo, c'est la plateforme de laquelle on a parlé dans la présentation initiale. Donc, elle est en train d'être utilisée à l'université de Kassel depuis un bon moment.
L'université, il y a 4 partenaires.
Oui, il y a 4.
Marrakech, Jeddah,
Donc, c'est bon là. Est-ce que, s'il n'y a pas de questions, est-ce que mademoiselle Donia ou madame Donia est prête à présenter ou est-ce qu'on peut continuer la discussion ici?
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes.
Elle dit yes.
Okay, could you please share my presentation?
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci.
Wait, do you hear us?
Yes, I do. Could you please go over the slides as I present? Could you hear me?
Yes. But the other participant not. Is it off now?
Sorry?
Keep talking, please. Hello, do you hear us?
Yes, I do. I just said, is it possible to go over the slides?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, we could start.
All right, okay. So
Or shall
I do apologize, first of all, for the inconvenience. Do you guys hear me well?
the chair of the session will introduce you first, and you could start.
All right, okay. Okay, sorry.
No, I think introductions can be brief.
Yeah.
You can see her name, Dunya Mansawi, and you can also introduce yourself with a little bit more detail before you you get into the presentation. This is an interesting title, Media as the New Teacher, a multidimensional analysis, Moroccan old and new media during quarantine. Case study of Dizem and Facebook. Please go ahead.
Right. So hello everyone. I feel bad for not being able to be there. I'm a third year PhD candidate at the University of Hassan II in Casablanca, and I am a part-time teacher at the university too. And I'm more specialized in media discourse and media studies in general. So today's presentation or the paper, this is the outline of my paper. So I'll just start with like a small introductions, and I'll try to introduce the questions, the objectives, the related scholarship. Then I'll move straight to the methodology, the approach, which are used to demonstrate how media could be like the new teacher. And then we'll move straight to the analysis discussion, and then I'll finish up with the limitations of the study as well as a conclusion. All right. So I think we could all like agree that COVID-19 or the pandemic in general, all the lockdown, has been a turning point in the world, that it has like shifted everything. Sorry?
Nothing, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So it actually has presented and still presenting a lot of several challenges, which really calls for change. So my paper actually tries to expose all of the explicit and implicit expressions, words, signs, images, discourses, narrative, and anything that could be distracted from media, and to show how media has become a source of indoctrination. And I actually use Henry Jenkins' term, conversions. He actually uses this term to talk about the conversions or the trends or the shifts from old to new media, but I actually reused the term and how it has contributed, how the pandemic itself has contributed in the shift from actual like face-to-face educational uh, like levels to more of an online classes. So, in order to do so, this paper actually tries to deconstruct the narrative of media and to show, as I said, how language discourse could be considered as a vehicle to construct certain realities. And it is done through the analysis of linguistic features. And this is done for the purpose of revealing how media is actually indeed the new instructor of people. Could you please proceed to the next one? Next slide. All right. So one of the objectives of this paper, so it tries actually to provide readers with a multi-dimensional analysis of the Moroccan old and new media during quarantine. And I think we could all agree that the information age has brought with it like countless of news tools and instrumentations. And with the pandemic, it has become, it's like we have a combination of both. So information age plus the pandemic have both led to new opportunities and new like patterns to create new alternatives. Um, and even like yesterday, the key note speaker like talked about the status of the teacher and whether we can have alternatives or not, which is also like part of this paper because it really puts in question the status of the teacher and whether we really need that teacher, not because we have like a lot of other alternative teachers. And it is also one of the courses of this paper is to dig into these effects of both Moroccan traditional and social media during this period, and to see how this how the lockdown in general had certain effects, especially on the educational and the educational level. Next, please. Right. So the main core is actually to compare two sources. Old media, the example is the Zen, and new media, which is Facebook or one of those. So I try basically through the paper to map out all the narratives addressed during quarantine on the level of education. So the goal is basically to highlight the transition and conversions towards alternative educative features. And besides the content of the narrative, I try also to go through the strategic use of language and visual elements also because visuality is also important in how events are and how events are broadcast to the public through certain visual elements, which is also important and which contributes also to what is or what could be called the new teacher. Next, please. So the questions that this paper tried to address could be summed up in these. So how can media change forms of communication and create new sources of information? What urges Moroccans to use Facebook as a platform for an alternative media for educational purposes? Because we have seen a lot of pages, a lot of community pages, community groups which focus more, which are like education based. Also, how could we consider new media as a means of empowerment, especially in the period of COVID-19, because we cannot really have that face-to-face encounters with teachers, with schools, with instructors in general. So we had to look for alternatives. And last question is, could we really consider COVID-19 a turning point that has changed the process of agenda setting, especially the one related to education? Because even like framing and agenda setting are really important when it comes to media analysis and especially when it comes to education. So in order to do so, the methodology that I have opted for, or the umbrella, is constructivism model, which is really interesting because it falls into what I have mentioned before, and the fact that it is almost as we live within media, and now we live or we will learn through media, and it's like our lives on different levels, be it economy, culture, ideology, um, social life, and now on the educational level is like all of those levels are actually filtered through media. So within this umbrella, I use critical discourse analysis. So the goal is not, because most of the time CDA or critical discourse analysis is seen as a negative uh, framework because it tries to criticize and critique everything, but it's not always a bad thing that media is becoming the new teacher. But what I consider to be more important is to be aware of that and to have that choice whether to embrace media as a new teacher or not. So within this framework, there's the sampling. So the availability, sorry, and language are contributing factors leading to the material selection of this research. So I went for certain elements that I will try to go through afterwards. As for the theoretical coding, coding actually helps like in the sampling because they help diminish the quantity of elements into codes and signs. So whether we have like a big data, it just like brings down to very small portions of it. Could you go next? Before, okay.
Sorry, did
Could
I
you
go
go
too far?
There's a slide. Okay, thank you. So for old media, I opted for the Zem because it is one of the official Moroccan channels. And for the Zem, I only opted for advertisements, like three examples of advertisements. And the question here is the Zem propaganda? And as I mentioned before, we don't have to always to use propaganda as a negative, as in to give it like that negative connotation. We just use it because that is the technical word for it. So as I mentioned, it does not always have to be subliminal and negative. And the choice of the Zem was based on observation. And during quarantine, I think I and the majority of you have noticed that shift of the content. And as far as content is concerned, which is really interesting to study that shift and to read behind it and to reveal whether there was a shift in the first place and why was there a shift in the first place. Next. As for new media, I opted for 2 community pages and 1 group, and the official page of said Day2, which was the Prime Minister back then. And you could see the shift in the usage of language and of discourse in general. Can you Yes. So the methods of analysis which are used are lexicalization, transitivity options, and topics of discourse. So these actually focus more on the language and the words used within those the discourses that I selected. Could you please just go to the next one? I don't want to. All right. So this is just a sample. So the first clause we have, I'll just try to give a brief translation. So the first one is how to get more than 15 in philosophy in the final exam, talking about baccalaureate, of course. So if we apply transitivity options, then we have the actor is not there. So it's the hidden you, if we may say. So it means that that you does not really have we don't have any actor, there is no actor, and it means that the you is not in control, doesn't have capacity, and doesn't have enough authority, if we may say. For the action, it is material, which means something is on the move, and whoever is doing this action for us is actually has the power and is doing something which is materialistic and not emotional or just words. For the second,
Sorry.
for the second, sorry.
Do you want to go ahead? Do you want to stay on this slide?
Yes, yes. Okay. So for the second example, it's we have I guarantee you that if you follow these videos and so on. So the actor is the I, and whenever we have I, it's like advancing and showing that they have authority, they are in charge, and they are being professional. As for the process, it's also action material process, which really shows that there are no emotions, nothing involved. What they are doing, it's scientific. It's 1 + 1 = 2. If we do this, if you follow what we give you, you will get this result, which is the grade, and that is the goal, which is you. And the usage of you, it means that it targets students, and it is what we call in-group language, and it is a language that is used for inclusion, and it is used most of the time in politics just to include as many people as possible, and it is a sort of invitation. Can you go next? Okay, next. All right, so for lexicalization, I'm not going to go into the details, but there have been a lot of words which are used, like the I, the you, I guarantee, the grading, I will help you, and the usage of certain words is not haphazard. It's not just done out of nowhere, but for the goal of actually achieving that educative and instructive goal. And there are like other elements which have been included, like repetition, speech features, agency of speech, turn taken, and all of them actually contributed to certain results that we'll see afterwards. Could you please go next? All right. So some of the results of this study show that COVID is indeed has been considered and still considering the key that has made a linkage between old and new media. And now we do consider new media as a means of empowerment of certain social categories, especially those who did not really have access before to education. And the question here is that could it really replace face-to-face encounters? And I asked that question to the key points speaker yesterday, because if we take like metaverse for example, does it mean that if we really embody that and adapt it to the educational level, does it mean that we will no longer have face-to-face encounters in general? Does it mean that media is going to be the new teacher, and that students will not be don't have even the necessity or the need to see any other teachers? Next. All right. So as a conclusion, just for the methodology, so the limitations are related strictly to the methodology, because I could not really apply a lot of tools and instrumentations. As for the results, they are conclusive because they are related to the Moroccan context. And also for this translation because there are like some cultural transposition, cultural transplantation, so it's difficult to translate from Moroccan dialects to English without actually having to lose some of the meanings. Next, all right. So overall, I just would like to point out that the rationale of this study is not to critique or to criticize, as I mentioned before, media and that it has become the new teacher. It's not something which is evil. But what I really call for is that we have to have that awareness and we have to have like media literacy to choose whether we really want to opt for media as a new teacher or not, and not having it imposed on us without in a very subliminal manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? From yes, I'm going to bring you the microphone.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you just mentioned through the analysis of the study that you have conducted, there is a link, strong link after the pandemic between old and the new media. I didn't understand this point. Could you please just elaborate on this, how the pandemic made like a strong link between these two examples, to them and Facebook? And the second question, for the new media, what do you think that post-COVID results, which means that the empowerment of education through new media actually is emphasized through these initiatives and as a replacement to face-to-face modes? Do we need kind of regulation or policies to manage this kind of education through new media like Facebook? Thank you.
Thank you, first of all, for your questions. So as far as the first question goes, deconversions is that it goes with the quarantine, as far as I'm concerned, because before, most of the people were addressed to both new media and old media at the same time. But then with quarantine, everything has shifted from old media to new media more. But it doesn't mean that there was like letting go of old media. It was still the new teacher. And I think we could have really witnessed that during quarantine, and the fact that there have been a lot of ads and advertisements, instructive ones, that call for certain elements that we're not going to go through that. And that shift has been, and I think for most of people, I mean, we do have certain like percentages. That's not part of my study, but we could see that the users of new media are more than those who use old media, especially during quarantine, and especially students, of course, because in old media there have been a lot of trainings and a lot of courses and classes that are done there, but they're not really welcomed as much as those who are exposed in new media. As for your second question, yes, and that's why I said that we do have to have a media literacy, because we cannot just be exposed to new media or old media, media in general, to any, especially when it comes to education, and consider it as a source of learning, because it can have fallacies, it can have a lot of deviations that we're not really aware of. But still, it is a strong alternative. We cannot really deny that, and it is still an alternative. But yes, that's why I said the rationale is actually to have a media literacy and to be aware, to have that awareness about what can like be caused if we are exposed to media, especially when it comes to students which are not mature enough or aware enough of what it can cause them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from out there or from here? I have a quick question, and then I'll let you all go, which is, it seems to me that one difference between the traditional media and the new grassroots media, if you will, for education is that with the traditional media, the public doesn't really have a choice, right? They get given whatever the ZEM decides to transmit to them, which may not necessarily be what they want to hear. Okay, whereas with the new media, they have a choice. But the issue there might be that the quality is not really vetted, and people may not really have the, be trained to recognize what high quality is and what maybe not so believable is. So how does that play out, do you think, in the transition? Have you looked at that at all? Is that something that you're interested in looking at?
I think that it goes both ways. Because, I mean, as we say it, like history is always written by the winner. So even if we do have history, why do we have source A and not source B? And why are we exposed to source A and not source B? And I think it's just our scope, as much as wide as we think our scope is it is still limited, whether it's new media or traditional media. Because even when it comes to new media, yes, we do have Facebook, we have other alternatives, and we have other outlets, but still the choice is really limited. And whether we think we have the freedom of choice, that choice is always limited to certain choices or to certain options that are presented to us.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Wait, was that another question? Okay, so thank you very much. And I have an announcement to make, which is that lunch will be served in the restaurant here at 2 p.m. Because of the prayer time. Okay, so bon appetit, everybody. Sorry for those of you who are online. You actually are probably missing an excellent meal because the kitchen here is very good. But it was nice to have you online anyhow. So have a great rest of the conference. And thank you for your contributions, everybody.